if I was going to measure the success of creativity, I would say, have I moved the art forward? And what I love about handballs, have I moved that art forward? And I was talking with one of my, I guess you'd say, students from long ago. She's far surpassed me now. Last night about that question, and I said, I just always thought that, have I moved the art forward? Is that something that you could say would be worth the time you've spent? And she said, yeah, it comes in the people you teach and the light bulbs you see going on.
Welcome to the Prolific Creations podcast. Today I'm joined with Kathie Fink, handbell soloist. So welcome, Kathie.
Thank you.
Thank you
nice
for joining
to be here.
Mm-hmm. Can you kind of walk us through and just, how you became a handbell soloist?
How I became a handbell solo artist was because my father introduced handbells to me when I was about 9 years old, and he had our family learn how to ring handbells, and he taught us what's called solo, American style solo ringing. So I spent the majority of my life having to ring handbells before I could get any dinner, because that was the only way he would get us all to practice. And then we would go on tours when I was in junior high. And then as I became an adult, there was a request from the national board to teach solo ringing. And that's how I got my start.
Awesome. So throughout that journey then, can you kind of talk about how, or just what does creativity mean to you personally as a handbell solo artist?
Well, I never thought about it as being particularly creative, but I knew my dad was, because he always thought outside the box. In fact, that became a kind of a family joke, because we had so many, my siblings were always trying to start businesses that flopped, and we just were always doing things a little different. Because when you do something with creativity, you have a safety issue. It's always, you have to decide whether you want to be safe or whether you want to put yourself out there. And I never had much trouble putting myself out there. So when I went into my profession, they actually encouraged my creativity in that side. So I was able to probably advance in my career and make better money because I was more creative.
Right. So then can you kind of, in your own words, describe what is creativity then to you?
I think it's a way of approaching problems, or even approaching something that you think needs to be fixed, and whether the other person wants it fixed or not. That can always be an issue. So I think it's when I see something that's broken or something could be done better, it just kind of springs into my mind. And I think some people are born with more of it than others, but I think it can be nurtured.
Okay. So then how do you nurture your own creativity?
Well, as they say, you dream things that have yet to be. You come up with, like the group I'm directing now, you just want to come up with better programs or way to stretch them. I think whenever you see something you can mold, I think that brings out your creativity.
Right. And so what about then in the case of where maybe you feel even, as a director, where something can't be molded as easy as for someone that has that willingness to learn, right? So for me, myself, right, I teach piano and I also teach at a high school here, and I teach teenagers, and the age of where they think they know everything and they don't want to learn, right? So
it's funny, because when I was about your age, I taught teenagers in a handbell group, and because my style was so different, they flocked to me because they were bored with the standard handbell assignments and stuff, and they wanted to learn how to move bells around. So I didn't have that problem because I was only about, I think it was 23 or 20, I guess I was 26 when a lot of these people came to me and wanted to learn a different style. But just last week, it happened in junior high. I was subbing as a director for a group, and there was this little junior high girl that did not want to be open to learning any new thing. And I guess that's, I don't know. I don't know if you can get them to change their mind. I think you just have to keep the positivity going, I guess, and show them that, you might know something more than them.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think, obviously everybody learns differently. I'm sure as a director, as a teacher, that where, hey, not everybody learns the same. But just getting them to a point where, like you said, just, hey, there's something that I can teach you. And if, you want to come along for the ride, you're more than welcome to. And I think that for me, myself, as a piano instructor, is how, I've been somewhat successful to getting students to participate. A lot of the times, whenever I do get a new student for piano, it's because their parents want them to take piano and the kids are not wanting to. But, luckily, they end up enjoying it, and, it's them wanting to do it as opposed to them feeling like they're forced.
Well, I think it's harder on piano than handbells because people that try piano, like my granddaughter, I mean, she's always excited to do the handbells, but not the piano so much because she has to practice. And because the handbells, maybe once they learn notes, they can really see themselves going somewhere with it. I think it's a little bit more encouraging. I think that's why the junior high little girl last week really liked it, because likes handbells, because I know she's musical in other instruments, but
Right.
it's like if she sees, the other problem is if she doesn't see the people around her doing the same thing, then if they're not going to jump on the bandwagon. They're going to say, oh, I know. And when you're teaching piano, it's one-on-one, so that's a little harder. When I had other high school students with this one girl, she just looked around and like, oh, they're doing it that way, so I better jump on the bandwagon.
Right. And even much more so, I think, handbells is such a unique instrument, right? I mean, piano, you can find a bunch of people that play piano, and so it may not seem as unique, but handbells is just, I think personally, such a unique instrument to where even listening to it when I went out into California and listened to Israel perform, it was just it was very awe-inspiring and amazing to hear on just the the conformity between everybody in the group, and come together and play a piece, right? It's different being playing piano on your own, right, than playing with the band or with the group. Much more, when with handbells, where hey, you can play multiple notes, but you need a greater scale to bring a whole song together, I think. And it's amazing it's really amazing to hear it come together.
It's a real fellowship group,
right?
Because if you're on, it's not like you have three other altos that can fill in your part, if there's a hole there. And so I always felt like it was the best depiction of what a true church should be like, regardless of all your different beliefs. Or we have many different denominations in our handbell group. It's like they support each other because you want to have the whole of that piece of music to sound good. So each one supports the other, wants the other one to be better, and wants themselves to get better so they don't let down the group.
Right. Yeah, striving for that common goal, I think plays a huge part in it for sure.
It's not like a piano or a flute where you can actually play a piece by yourself. You
right.
need all your other buttons come alongside.
Right. Yeah. So then, do you think creativity is something that can be learned, or do you think it's something that is innate?
I think it's both. There's people that are born with a certain amount of curiosity and open-mindedness and risk-taking more than others, and maybe think outside the box and break the rules. I know it's often stifled in the environment in grade school because the creative kids always got in trouble. I was always getting in trouble for doing things that instead of staying right and following the little marching orders. So, but then it can be nurtured. I think you can learn to be more creative if you're willing to take a risk.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the hardest part now, and getting people more in this case musically inclined, because that risk of getting it wrong, right? Especially when I talk about this all the time. We live in a world where you can easily go on social media and learn about millions of people's lives, but realistically they're only showing those positives. And so when you do go try something new, it's easy to compare what's going on in your life to when you only see the positives and think that it's a failure, it's not where it needs to be. But I wholeheartely agree that we have to take that risk, especially as creatives, in trying something new, trying something different, and just going out there and just exploring, just for piano, whether it's just a different type of style of music or a different genre, even just picking up a new instrument, or even playing with other people.
I think because most creative people don't need it to be perfect the first time out, and perfectionism. I think that's the biggest foe of creativity. And sometimes you just have to come up with your best shot and let it and sit with it for a while.
Right.
And for people that want to fail because they're perfectionists, they don't even want to start. They don't want to go down that road. So that's one thing that risk takers or people that are creative don't mind putting it out there. We may fail.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and, as a business owner, one of the things that, everybody always talks about when starting a business is that don't be afraid to fail, because, that's where you learn. Right. And I think that easily transcends or translates into music, even where, hey, if something's not working, try something different.
Even with your kid, when they get ready for recitals and they get all nervous and then they mess up and they feel so bad. But I mean, you have to move people as part of it. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that's creativity, but that's on the performance side, is you have to move people toward being willing to put themselves out there again in front of people. Like you said, it's hard for the kids on social media because they look at it as when it gets all cleaned up, or they're going to, person is so great and they never have a down day. But, that's a nice thing. The creative people know that they're probably going to fail a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And one of the biggest things that I noticed with my students is starting out, like within the first, first month to 9 months, whenever they do mess up in the middle of a piece, they're hard on themselves, like, messed up. Can I start over? And I'm like, no, don't start over. Just keep going, right? It's not a video game where you can just restart. You have that extra life. Like, just keep going. Most of the time, people won't even notice that you make a mistake unless you make it obvious. And I think that's one of the hardest things to instill in this case for kids, because they think, like everybody heard it now, I'm a failure. I have to restart. That way I can get it right this time.
Yeah, and that's the worst thing they could probably do, is go back to the beginning to restart. I have a problem with my ringers on that too. They always want to start at the beginning. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. And I said, well, if you get lost in the middle of a performance, we're going to meet at this measure, and go on from.
Yeah, having that checkpoint. Do you think then that environment plays a role in fostering that creativity?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And we have to be careful because you don't want to squelch the creativity. But, I would say that's maybe why the Japanese and the Chinese, when they have such rigorous and, you do everything by the book, that when they get behind handbells, they were just in awe of them. And they've taken it to another level, because then they can take their perfectionism and put it on top of their creativity, or at least to how to ring the bells really, really well. They do a good job.
So then, do you think there's anything that, or what would you say are the main things that can hold back a person into being creative? Would you say it's perfectionism, or would you identify it as something else?
I think it's perfectionism and too scared to take a risk.
So then, is there any other advice that you would give to someone that maybe is brought up in that environment where everything has to be perfect, right? Whether that be in social media, whether that be in the house that they grow up in, or who they associate themselves with. Is there anything that you would say or advice that you would give to allow them to maybe not just focus on that perfectionism? I'm not saying to completely disregard it, right? But to allow themselves to be more, I don't want to say more free, but just more, have more liberty to be creative.
They probably need more rituals. I know that came up in one of your questions, but I think they need to get out of this. I won't start till I know I have all my little ducks in a row. So they probably need more rituals. Like what I do is I have what I call 8 days. And that's when I can't start anything. Like if there's a block where I just can't seem to move forward, I set my old fashioned kitchen timer to 20 minutes. They can do it on their phone. And I start practicing a solo. And then when the timer goes off and you got all this enthusiasm when you want to keep going, I stop. And I go to do something else. I said, I set up for 20 minutes for doing emails. Those emails I didn't want to answer and I don't want to get back to people on. And then when the timer goes off, I say, okay, another 20 minutes, I'll practice piano. And then when you get to about the fourth time around, you go back to the first one. Okay, let's do 20 minutes more on that handbell solo or 20 minutes more on that piano practice. And then it doesn't seem so long and and daunting. And also, if you have a huge project that you just don't even know where to start, I try to break it down into chunks and then try to just take one step toward it. So if I have like this program I've got to do for Christmas, or figure out what the name and all that, then I just take like one step toward making a phone call to someone, or that they had to get out of the way in order to get that program on their schedule, or to make sure that maybe do two phone calls within a couple minutes. So, and then I think the next thing for people that are perfectionists, they really need to collaborate with someone who's pretty creative, so that they can put their ideas out there and that person can give them feedback. I mean, even as far as I have a girlfriend who just, I won't say she's a clutterbug because she knows where everything is in every pile, but she needs someone with her to say, okay, let's sweep out this garage and let's start from the beginning and just put a few things back at a time. So sometimes people that are perfectionists are just so overwhelmed they won't even take that first step.
Right. So then, I mean, even setting that ritual, right, takes discipline, right? Even a ritual of making your bed in the morning, right, that takes that discipline. Is there any advice then, because you do have a ritual, because you do have that discipline already, is there any advice that you'd give to someone where they struggle to have that discipline, start that discipline, or even maintain that discipline?
Well, if that 20 minutes is too long, then do 15. I mean, just do 10. Set your timer for 10. They just have to see that it's within their ability to do at least 10 minutes on that horrible, like the term paper they have to write. Okay, just set your timer for 10 and go on the internet for 10 minutes and think of things, write down some of the way you have to approach it, or the way you have to, people you have to contact to get more information on. I mean, just do something for 10 minutes, even whatever you can. I think as your discipline gets better, it's probably not hard for people that love to play piano to sit down and rehearse for an hour and a half. I know when I was younger, I used to just love to practice. So, but I didn't have to do these little rituals. But now that I'm older, I don't want to do any of it. So, I have to do this timer stuff a lot. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting to see even on social media now, right, of people, of how they do practice that ritual or set that discipline to something where I just saw a video of this girl where she's studying, and it's she has a bunch of ice in a cup, and basically her whole goal is that she'll study until all the ice can just completely melts in that cup. Or people will have a stick candle, and they'll burn it, and they won't stop studying until the whole candle burns out.
Wow, that's real discipline. I don't think I could go that long. Maybe just 20 minutes.
No, yeah, and so it's interesting just the creative ways of how people even then are setting that discipline on themselves. I mean, kudos to them to find something that works, for them. I think the biggest struggle that I have now with my students on even getting them to practice daily, or even at the high school, is their phone. Um, they For whatever reason they constantly feel like they have to be on it, like someone's messaging them 24/7, and most of the time it's not even that, like, no, they're not getting any notifications. It's just them having that anxiety that something's going on, that they just need to be constantly on it, or constantly checking it. And I know there's this like little lockbox that you can put the electronics in, and basically just set a timer, and not until that timer goes off, then you can unlock your or grab your phone out of the little case. I
Well,
tell
they
my
have that FOMO, right? FOMO, the fear of
yeah,
missing
probably the
out.
fear of missing out. And
And
even then, it's like videos that they are consistently seeing,
right, but
from
they're
what I
stressing.
noticed.
I mean but that's that instant gratification thing. We don't stress much with kids having to plow through something. That's why we break it up into chunks. The kids
Right,
probably don't go out and mow their yard anymore. When that every Saturday when your dad made you go out and mow the yard, and you couldn't go anywhere till it was done. And yeah, I can imagine them, putting 30 minutes away to mow the yard without looking at their phone.
right,
Yeah, that's
right.
hard.
Have you ever worked with anybody that has kind of inspired you? I know you mentioned your dad earlier in for handbell, but um, throughout your handbell journey, or even in whatever in your piano, is there anybody that's ever inspired you to just keep going, or even just to better yourself?
Oh yeah. Um, I think there's many people, even with your coworkers at work, where you see someone that's doing a really good job, and then you want to rise up to that thing. Um, yeah, I have. There's one of my ringers that I taught solo ringing. She's gone on to do things way beyond me. As far as she went to become the national president, and she teaches stuff, and that's an inspiration to see one of your students. I'm sure you have that all the time with when you see a student go on and become a professional or something, you just feel good about it. But as I'm getting older, um, maybe my mentors, because they're not older, that's for sure. If I'm going to have a mentor, it's probably going to be younger, and it would be in something that I would start. I know that when you were talking about how to get started, sometimes they say with depressed people, the best thing they can do is just tell themselves to get out of bed and make their bed. That's all they'll do for that day, and that'll get them on their way. And I feel like that when I'm supposed to be exercising, and I don't want to go to the gym and exercise. So then I think, well, I'll just put on my clothes and I'll take a walk around the block, just a walk. And I find that when just around the block, just a short walk today, because I don't feel like going on my regular walk, just a short walk. And then I find when I get out there, and I'm more motivated to go on and take the longer walk once I get started. So sometimes that's all it is too. So um, I think if I had a mentor, it would be if I was starting something new at my age to learn. For instance, I decided to do a Shutterfly book, which is even kind of old fashioned now because people put everything on the computer. But I thought I'd try to make a Shutterfly book, and I've been struggling with that for about 4 months, and it's given me a lot of stress. And I've tried all my rituals, and I have a mentor, and she's a girl that knows how to fix all the problems. So I just talked to her on Sunday and said, okay, I'm almost done. I need you to come by and edit my book and make sure my spellings are correct, and make sure that I've, give me some other pointers. And she was willing to do that. So I think that's important that you do find someone, especially when you're starting a new project,
Right,
to bounce your ideas off of.
right. And so then, how then would collaboration impact your creative work?
Oh, does it a lot. I mean, maybe not so much in directing the group, but in doing small duets with them or quartets. I mean, that's where your collaboration really comes in on moving and ebbing and flowing with your fellow person, so you would have a musical outcome that's really, really good. So yeah, collaboration's important. It's also important, like, I was just thinking the other day, I thought, I've done all these solos and I don't have any of them published. And that's a big deal in handbell world. A lot of the publishers not only get to teach, which I don't want to do anymore, but you have your name out there, and my girlfriend I talked about that's younger than me said, Kathie, you've got to get yours published because your solos are so above what the normal soloist is doing. And so I was thinking the other night, it takes money to have someone go on finale and put your arrangements in and stuff because I don't do finale. And I tried to start at one time, and that was a near disaster. So that's on my bucket list now. If I have actually found the arranger I think I want to use by collaboration. She told me which one to go to, and now I've just got to call him and see if he'll do some of these arrangements and get that done. It'll cost you money.
Right.
Cost money. But, I'm at that age I thought, well, that's what you should use your money for, just to get that done.
Right.
Get it off the list.
Yeah. And so do you think collaboration is necessary for a person that's wanting to try something new or wanting to expand their horizons in whatever their creative outlet is?
I think it really helps because, especially if you meet weekly or something on your projects, but even if that other collaborator is doing a different project, and you meet weekly with them, and then you know that you have to do something before that next week because they're going to be asking you about it. It's sort of like your, what do they call it? The person that will keep you your accountability partner. It's sort of the same. Maybe AA is actually a collaboration, where they come in there and they keep you accountable, and that's what you need in the creativity too. You could have a lot of things, but until you actually have something accountable pushing you toward a deadline. There's a lot of stories about Steve Jobs and how he would go to his engineers and say, well, what about doing something like this? And they'd say, oh, good, yeah, we'll have it for you in 6 months. And he'd say, I need it in 6 weeks. And they'd all drop their jobs, and then they'd go back, and they didn't want to disappoint him, so they'd kill themselves, and they'd come up with whatever extra, the phone he could put together. Yeah, he was really a creative person that relied on others doing their collaboration to get it done, but at least putting the idea out there. Yeah, he was amazing.
And so then do you think then as a creative that we need that deadline, right? Because even talking now about someone as Steve Jobs, do you think we need that deadline in order to, I guess, meet our goals?
Definitely. I think it was Pastor Jack Hibbs that said, if it wasn't for procrastination, nothing would ever get done. And that's true. You need a deadline. Otherwise, it's always high in the sky. It's a dream that you're going to do it someday. But then, so especially as I'm getting my age and older, I'm realizing, not a lot of time left. You better hurry and get that done if you're going to get it done. If it's that important to you. If it's not that important to you, then basically what comes out is, that's a lot they say on losing that last 10 or 15 pounds. You won't do it if it's not that important to you. And how do you know it's not that important to you? Because you haven't done it. You've set it with your 15 pounds and you haven't lost it. So it's obviously not that important to you, even though you talk about it all the time.
Right.
So deadlines, I think, are very, very helpful.
And so what advice would you give to someone, especially someone that, has been playing for a while, to set that deadline and then also meet that deadline?
You said, how do you get someone to do it?
No. So how as for someone that has had a creative outlet for quite a while, how have you set a deadline and then ensured that you've met that deadline?
Well, just before I retired, there was they have something called Handbell People and Handbell L and different handbell groups. You can go and kind of banter things back and forth. And one day they were having a discussion. Now, I'm not really a member of that, but people call me and say, did you know they're having a discussion on this? And they were having a discussion on how did solo ringing get started. Did it start from a bunch of big ringers, a big group of ringers, and then one decided they wanted to be a solo? Or did it start from a solo ringer and then adding different people? They were just wondering how solo ringer got started, which came first, this chicken and the egg kind of thing. I knew which cane started because I grew up when handbells became big in the United States, and there were groups of 12 uh, or 15 ringers, and they just all rang their two bells. And I know my dad had started this ensemble ringing that eventually led to me solo ringing because of the technique that was used. So I wanted to get that out. So here I was a year before retiring, and I decided that I would do a tour and called the Legacy Tour. It was in honor of my father. And I had all these old films from the 60s, black and white films that showed, because he had them from TV shows we had done and stuff, and that showed how solo ringing techniques started long before the um, big group was moving bells around all crazy. And so I went on the road. I probably gave over 300 concerts to different bell ringers all across the United States and across the world. I went to Finland and Japan and just to teach them the history behind it so it would be accurate. So I was, like I said, after I did that, it was starting out, it was really rough because we did not get this program together with the filming and everything done when I first had to go out on my first tour. And it was a little rough on that first tour. But as we got it down, my girlfriend, who was my accompanist, was my sister-in-law. And then the second time I went, it was this girl that was really she's one of these people who gets things done. And she said, Kathie, you need to make a DVD of that tour. So it will always be there for people to want to see the history of how Solo Ringer got started. And because of her pushing it, finding the right person, to record and make the DVD, we got it done. And now that was back in 2007. And now I look at it, I don't look at it very often, but when I think about it, I think I'm really glad I have this done, to show people in the future, if they ever want to bring up this old DVD or get it from the cloud now, I mean, they can see how solo ringing started
Right.
in America. Yeah.
And so yeah. So can you tell us more about, I know you mentioned you went on tour. What was that like?
Well, what I found was it was amazing how few clothes you can live with for 3.5 months. I mean, we just drove across the United States and we'd stay at people's houses. We'd give the concert, stay at their houses. They'd, feed us dinner and give us breakfast. The next morning we'd be on our way. So it was in a very low cost tour. But it was wonderful to meet so many people and so many other handbell ringers and to have them be open to learning about this instrument. It was fun.
Right. Is it something that you would do again or?
Oh, no. I've done that bit. That's the worst thing about creative people, I suppose. Once they've done it, they move on to something else. They've been there, done that. Now I'm ready to try something else. Yeah, no, I wouldn't go on today because the handbells are an instrument that's not like a piccolo that you can just march in with your case and ring your part and go home. Toot your part and go home and walk out the door. A handbell should set the tables and
right.
And the pads and the covers and put the handbells on it. And it's hard. And you have to lift this big case, which my solo handbells came in. And so I've just, no, I can't do that anymore. But I did realize that it's more fun to take a group like out to do different performances because they help you all set up and they'll help you get it all back in the car. And so it doesn't become just your ability to lift things by yourself by doing solos. And I also found out that with seniors, I go to senior villages, would just walk in with my little case of chimes, which is not very heavy, and give them each a chime, and they're just as happy as can be to learn how to ring a chime. That's a handbell instrument that's a lot lighter weight and doesn't need to be polished, and you don't drop it and crack it. So it's really good for seniors.
Right.
So yeah, I wouldn't go back on tour, no. Not unless I had a roadie. That's what I always said. If I had a roadie where I could finish the concert and walk away, and they would pack it and pack the car and take it to the next thing and set it up, yeah, then I might. But roadies
Hey,
would be
Israel
expensive.
I know Israel would love to. He would be a roadie.
Yeah, Israel would be a roadie.
No, but it's funny that you mentioned even the carrying around the gear, right? I remember one time I was with Iz, and I remember he showed me this big bell. It was almost as big as my head. And he's like, you need 2 hands for this one if you want to ring it. I was like, no way. He's like, try carrying it. And it was heavy.
Yeah,
So I can't
well,
imagine much more than here.
yeah, they're quite heavy. There's probably, well, probably about 7 pounds, maybe 7 or 8 pounds. Yeah, they're quite heavy. Yeah.
What are some common misconceptions that people may have about creativity within handbells, and can you kind of just talk to us about that?
Well, the misconception, I thought where you were going with the misconception was, what is a misconception about creativity? And I would say that's when people come to you and say, I don't have a creative bone in my whole body. Well, I think everybody does have creative bones. It's just that they don't ever nurture them. But common misconceptions and handbells about, are you going for creativity or about what in handbells that would be common misconceptions?
Well, anything as far as even just playing it, or whether it's the same as, I wouldn't say as easy as playing piano or any other instrument, but just an assumption that somebody may have about handbells and the creativity aspect maybe that even goes with it.
Well, I do think handbells are played very poorly in general for most of the groups that ring them, and they don't have a lot of technique. So then people that hear them think, "Oh, that's a handbell. I don't want to have anything to do with that, or have that at my musical concert at Christmas, or let a group come in and ring for us." So yeah, you're constantly correcting because it is an instrument that anyone can maybe walk in this piano that can read notes and can do it well. I mean, they'll just ring the bell, but they won't have much finesse behind it or really make it musical. I think it's sort of the same with the piano. You can have people that can play Mozart, off the charts, but give them a Chopin and they just don't ebb and flow. So I think it's the same thing that people think, well, if you get good enough at piano, anybody can play piano, but you can't. It's that certain people have that ability. I used to call it to kiss the handbell, to really make it sing. And
Mm.
I think it's the same with the piano. Certain people can make the piano talk to them or for them, and that's something that can't be taught. That's innate. That's what I think. There are only certain people that come up with that. Or, how they say the instrument picks you. You don't pick the instrument. So if you're a good
Mm.
pianist, it probably picked you. I started out with piano, but I felt like the bells were just calling to me. So that's the direction I went.
Sure. And so how then do you think can creativity be measured or even quantified?
Well, I wasn't sure where you were going with that question when you said, how can it be measured? I kind of came up with, it could be measured by the amount of success you have with it. Some people start out, and like I said, especially you get these people that want to start new businesses, and if they start out really great and they're going to do this and this and this, and then it flops, well, maybe that's a measure that you shouldn't go in that direction. Again, I can think of Steve Jobs, where he started Pixar. I mean, here's a man that's already was successful, starting a computer. And then I think he came back and started the iPhone. But when he started the computer, it was just unheard of. You could get a huge computer down to, even a phone size. And he had all these dreams. And then when they kicked him out of Apple, he went and started Pixar. I mean, some people just have these creative things. And then, and when he went to Disney, I remember Disney saying, well, you've got to let us be on the top line, Disney, and Pixar in the bottom. And he said, no, that's not going to work for me. We're going to be equal. I'm paying you for the advertising, but we got the storyline and we got the animation. So they fought over that for a while. I guess it was 1994 when he collaborated with, or 1995 when he collaborated with Disney for Toy Story. And then I was just making a list of his things. Then he had Bugs Life. Then he had Monsters Inc. Then he had Finding Nemo. And then he had The Incredibles. All before Disney was over there with their engineer making flops like The Jungle Book. And they kept saying they just surely can't have that creativity keep going. But that there was their engineer that did the storylines that just could pop one right after the other. So it was measured by his success, and then he sells it to Disney, and then it's all that's the end. So I think if you just it has to be measured by your success, I think.
Sure. So then how would you define success then? Right? Because everybody will have their own assumption or their own definition of that success. So then how would you yourself define success?
Well, a lot of times it's money. People are willing to pay for something, then that's successful. And if they're willing to pay you to teach them, that's successful. Or if they, in my case, they flew me to national handbell conventions, and I taught others to ring. And when others go on and take that to someone else, that's success, not necessarily in money, but in passing on the legacy, in passing on the ability to ring. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I think all those things measure it. I mean, it's sort of like those people that might feel that they're called to preach, and maybe they don't want to go through all the seminaries and stuff, but I'm called to preach, I'm sure of it. But you get out there and people aren't coming, well, then you kind of know you're not successful. You should try something else. Or if you don't, you think you're going to be if you think you always want to be a basketball player and you're only 5'7", chances are it's probably not the direction you should go for your creativity and your success.
Okay. So then how do you balance structure and spontaneity in your creative endeavors?
How do I balance structure and, you said balance? Was that the word you used?
Correct. Yes. In your creative endeavors.
Well, for me, my creativity, especially in the handbells, has always had to be in my extra time. And when you were raising kids as a single mom, you didn't have a lot, but you made time because creativity was important to you. And it's important enough to make the time and sacrifice maybe, I'm not sure, sacrificing watching TV or something, but you just didn't have time to do a lot of, the fun things that you would have done if you had more time when didn't have kids you were raising. And sometimes in those hardships is when your creativity really comes out. I mean, when my kids were in junior high and I had my son at a private school and I couldn't afford it unless I could teach the handbells. So they hired me as a junior high handbell teacher. Those were some of the most fun years, I think I taught it 3 or 4 years, because I got the kids from the band that could already read notes. And here was some junior high kids. Of course, they're bouncing off the walls, but it really pushed me then to be a better teacher and to do lesson plans and stuff like I wouldn't have done maybe when I was doing a church group. So, and they paid me, I mean, it balanced out. They could balance out for us. And I think they gave me a little extra for that. Once he was out, they started paying me. And that was worth it. Then you have to, a lot of times creativity, you have to push yourself in the hardships. That's where it makes you soar to the top. Or if, like you said, you give yourself a deadline, then you have to pump out something because that spring concert's coming. So you've got to get that done.
Right. And so what role does failure play within that creative process?
Well, like I said, with the other things you're doing, if it doesn't work, you got to move on. But I like Winston Churchill's quote. He said, "If you are going through hell, keep going." So a lot of times we feel like we're not getting there, but he said, just keep going until you get to the other side. Or like Edison, what they say, you had 1,000 failures of ways to make a light bulb until finally one worked. I mean, for me, success spurs me on. So, and you could take only, I guess, so much failure, and then you're either going to give up or you're going to move on to something else.
Right. And so then, even within that failure to where when you do become successful, or if you do become successful, how do you continue to find that inspiration when endeavoring out for a new project or starting a new project?
Well, I think other people sometimes ignite an inspiration in you. They'll say something, you say, "Oh yeah, we need to do that." And so then you start off down that rabbit hole, that rabbit trail of trying. And some people have to rein you in and say, "Kathie, we don't have that money to do that, or you're going to have to slow down. We can't keep up with you." Um, and you have to have a lot of energy if you're gonna. I think people that have energy, it inspires energy in other people, but also they have to have their energy to keep going. And I find my energy running down, so maybe I'm not going to go down as many rabbit trails. And you have to pray about your time. You don't want to be wasting your time on something that isn't either beneficial to others or beneficial to you. If you, I always like to do things that are beneficial to others more than beneficial to me. But but part of the beneficial to me is trying to keep myself in shape so I can be beneficial to others. You have to do that too. So, and then I sit with an idea. When I get an idea, I don't know where it comes from. A lot of times it comes in my dreams or it comes under stress, but it does come in dreams and things will pop out. And I go, yeah, why didn't I think of that? Or when I'm out running, then something will pop. I'll be thinking, mulling over something that needs to get done, and an idea will just pop in there. So those two things. And sometimes you just sit with an idea and dream and think which way it could go. But inspiration, you say, how do you get inspiration? I think inspiration is the new project. That's how you get it started in creativity. It does become the new project. Dreaming about it. Yeah.
Right. And so then do you believe creativity is more about originality or more of iteration?
I think it's both. And I think the iPhone is a perfect example of that. iPhone 1, by the time you get to 15 or whatever you guys are up to now, that's iteration. It just gets better and better. But that first one to come out, I mean, oh my goodness, was like, whoa, where'd that come from? And so you need that originality at the first, but then it shouldn't stop there. You should just keep on trying to improve or redo it. I know my bell ringers are going, well, do we have to do that same version of Jingle Bells again this Christmas? Can you come up with a different one? And I probably will, but in some ways it's comforting to do some of the things over and over the way you've done them, but then always add new things and keep on changing.
Yeah. So because you have different disciplines and different creative outlets like bell ringing or even piano, how do those different disciplines approach creativity differently?
Well, I did get this. I had taught a creativity assignments course. Sometimes the biggest problem with handbells is the way you give a person to ring 2 or 3 bells. And it turns out it's kind of impossible for them to really ring those bells very musically in the way the piece is written. So a lot of times it's the creative assignments of giving that bell away or showing them how to do a Shelley ring or a 4-in-hand, or that's technique. That's some of our techniques we use in handbells. And I think sometimes it's because I taught that creative assignment class, it's how you assign bells to make things easier. So I did have this quote from one of my assignment classes, and I think it has to do with musicality too and how you play. To play, this actually came from a blind church organist named Jean Langlaise from, I hope I'm saying his name right, a French blind church organist. And he said, to play only what is written is the domain of science. To realize what is not written is the domain of art. And I think that's how we have the difference between discipline, you said, and creativity.
Yeah, I love that quote. That's really good.
Yeah, that's a good one. I know that the music, the first time out of the box, sometimes is the best I've run. Sometimes I sit down and come up with something or an arrangement and I go, whoa, yeah, that really works. And other times, it takes much tweaking over and over and over again until it finally gels in. So yeah, that's kind of a, when I say a hit and miss, but it's something that when you're talking about can't be quantified, sometimes it just happens.
Right. Right. And even then, so, I mean, like you mentioned, is just trying those different things, right, until you find something that does work. I think is, a great endeavor that, or something that does need to be nurtured a lot to where you get comfortable being uncomfortable, and just trying those different things.
It's good. Yeah. Being uncomfortable in it. I know I was doing this piece of on foreign for Yesu Joy, and I realized could only go so fast, moving so many bells quickly when there's only two hands. And then I thought, well, what if I did a six in hand? What if I had three in each hand and was able to go? Maybe I could go quicker as a solo. So that's one of those things that I'm still gelling in my head about, could that work?
Right.
And you're really pretty good at it. And I am not good at that technique. So part of it is getting better at the technique so that you can then dream things for that technique to do. And that's important too. Yeah.
Right. And so can you kind of talk us through on how you think technology has either, influenced, or whatever you want to call it, affected either positively or negatively on how a person can be creative in today's times? And maybe even how, if you want to talk about how that's changed, from previous years.
Yeah, definitely from previous years. Technology is just, that's a generation behind me. When I think of AI and all the stuff that's going to do, I feel kind of sad in some ways for the creativity, because the AI is going to do it better than us. It's going to write books better than us and come up with poems and probably create music. Um, a a group I knew several years ago named Velocity did a mashup of doing looping in their program and stacking different handbell techniques on top, and they were looping it the whole time. And people in the audience didn't have a clue what they were doing. That kind of thing. It's kind of like it was so new when it was, and they didn't quite get it. And so that's stretching the boundaries. But I think AI is going to do a job on us where we might not be able to measure the success of our program as well because of AI. It's kind of scary, but we'll hope to keep that. We'll hope to work with it instead of letting it master us or scare us away on what can be learned.
Sure.
I know that I thought about one of my questions was that I came up was, how do you measure the success of creativity? And I was thinking of AI and taking it away from just the joy of learning it yourself, teaching it to someone and seeing that light bulb come on. You can jump all that and just go straight to AI and have them do it for you. And then the kids won't have that joy of learning and stretching. And that makes me kind of sad, that if I was going to measure the success of creativity, I would say, have I moved the art forward? And what I love about handbells, have I moved that art forward? And I was talking with one of my, I guess you'd say, students from long ago. She's far surpassed me now, last night about that question. And I said, I just always thought that, have I moved the art forward? Is that something that you could say would be worth the time you've spent? And she said, yeah, it comes in the people you teach and the light bulbs you see go on. And then the second question, I think, with creativity, whether it's successful, is, have I moved the audience? Have they heard something in the handbells or heard something in music that touched them? And then I think the third question is, what do the ringers gain? Have they moved the art forward? Have they moved themselves forward so that they feel better about handbells and what they have brought out in music to the world?
Right. Yeah, I love that. That's amazing. There's the last thing I would want to discuss, something that you kind of mentioned, is, with AI becoming very dominant in a lot of aspects, and what's being done today, whether that's with music, with movies, with do you think then that using that AI, do you think that's a true form of creativity, right? Or do you think it is more of that iteration of it's not even defined as creativity. I don't know.
I was going to say, this question you should probably just remove me from, because I haven't a clue. I don't know enough about AI to know whether that would be influencing creativity or whether it would just be throwing marbles in a box and let them all come out in a certain color that would be better than if you had individually put the marbles in a row. I don't know. I don't know enough about it, so I'd have to pass on that question.
Sure. No. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you, Kathie, for taking time out of your day to talk with us and just your creative endeavors with as being a handbell solo artist, and just how that's shaped your perspective on creativity, and just how you've interacted with other ringers, and just from going on tour to teaching other people. It's truly amazing to hear, and I just want to thank you for doing that for us.
Thank you for inviting me here today.